BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. We asked today why the livestock industry is asking Wales, Scotland and England to align their approach to blue-tongue virus restrictions.
It would be catastrophic for the industry if they can't move their animals. And, we'd very quickly get into an animal welfare worry with upland farms not being able to move their sheep in the direction that they should go.
We'll have more on that a little later. First, though, to funding. While the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is getting ready to make her spending review statement later today, many farming and conservation groups have already been lobbying Westminster to try to convince ministers that any more cuts must be avoided. Well, it may be canny timing, but DEFRA has announced that £14 million is being made in a one-off payment to boost the use of unharvested and surplus food to be made available to 12 redistribution charities, including FareShare and the Felix Project. Chris Gibbon-Walsh, Chief Executive of FareShare, told me how the money could be used.
A large part of it will go towards supporting farmers. We already work with 100 farmers today, but we'd love to work with even more to go back into the field for the types of crop that they might not have been able to harvest and sell. But actually, we think rather than having that wasted in the field, we can get that amazing produce out of farms, supporting them to go back into the fields and harvest the crop, and then also pay for transport and logistics to our warehouses across the country that can redistribute it to thousands of local community charities. Alongside that part of the fund is an increase in our capability to be able to take and use more of the whole pallet produce safely in our warehouses and our network. And also some innovative ways of thinking about produce, whether that is gleaning projects, so going into fields ourselves and helping pick that crop with volunteers, or other innovations. So there's a whole spread of exciting opportunities.
This is a one-off, time-limited fund, isn't it? So when it's gone, I presume.
That's right for this fund, but we are optimistic and we are excited about the opportunity to demonstrate how this works, and also to be able to work with government and farmers about how we could turn this into something more sustainable and more long-term, so that we are able to access great quality, nutritious produce and get it to communities across the country that are doing amazing things with it. This isn't just about produce. This is about how people then use it to bring people together and solve so many different problems, whether that's supporting people to eat more fruit in schools, whether it is helping people out of homelessness in homeless hostels, or whether that's supporting people with addiction or isolation or mental health in community centres. All of these things are happening because of us being able to access this type of surplus food. And we would love to be able to do that, not just this year, but well beyond.
Today is the Spring Statement Day. A lot of people have been lobbying government to try to secure the funding for their department. So you must be pretty pleased about this, because this is quite a lot of money from a government that says there's not a lot of money around.
Of course, it's a lot of money, and of course, we're incredibly grateful. But I think it's important to think about what we can do with that money. So for every £1 invested in FareShare UK, we can actually turn that into £13 worth of outcomes for the economy. And that's delivered through accessing this food because it's surplus, being able to transport it and use an amazing volunteer network and support that we have across the country, and then get it to these wonderful community organisations, again, largely run by volunteers, that are able to turn it into real change for society in a very economically viable way that has this wonderful multiplier effect. So we think actually this is money incredibly well spent.
Chris Gibbon-Walsh from FareShare. Now, this week we're following the journey of a loaf of bread from seed to shelf. So far, we've heard about developing wheat seed and growing the crop. Today, it's time for the harvested grain to be cleaned and stored. Cam Grain in Cambridgeshire was set up in 1983 by a group of farmers who wanted to pool their grain and market it together. Over the last 40 years, the farmer-owned co-op has grown and now it has 500 members. I went for a tour around the site and first talked to CEO Simon Willis. He told me it's all about consistency.
What we try and do is make sure that we pull across multiple different farms to blend a large homogeneous bulk to meet the needs of the miller. As a miller, the last thing you want to be doing is changing your mill and your settings for every different load. Farmers can send in their grain. We can sort out as many of the problems as we can resolve and blend away as many of the problems as we can to come up with as large a homogeneous bulk, so day in, day out, the miller knows that they're going to get a consistency of supply.
Well, just across from the office, I'm taken on a tour of the site where all the grain is cleaned, stored and sorted. Dan Parrott is head of operations.
So we've got, these are our harvest staff who've started coming in already. We're getting the stores cleaned down, ready for harvest. We can process comfortably 30 to 40 lorries an hour.
Right up above are probes, aren't they? And you send them into the grain in the back of the lorry. What are they looking for?
Main things that we're looking for in terms of specifications to tip on are protein, moisture and specific weight. We're carrying out other checks in there as well. We can do mycotoxin testing. We're looking for insects. And one thing we're looking for more, because it was such a big problem last year, is ergot.
Now, ergot is a fungal disease that grows in the grain. It sort of leaves a bit black thing hanging off the end of the grain.
A single piece of that arriving to a customer can get the whole lorry rejected. However, with the processing that's going on this site, we're running 3 different optical sorters here, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and we're removing ergot with those 3 machines.
Right, quite noisy. So Dan, we've got a screen on the front of this machine showing us that it's going through the machine and being identified, so the bad grain is being identified. We then went up to the rather quieter environment of the control room, where Ethan Leonard was monitoring and getting rid of the ergot grains.
Currently, we are colour sorting.
It seems extraordinary to me that you've got a machine that can actually look at every single grain.
Yes.
And it will punch them out with air.
With air, yeah.
If it has got ergot in it, or if it's the wrong colour.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, these lights basically tell you so these are like hoppers. So that tells you if it's actually got grain in it. The green means it's operating. Basically, if you want to go to the colour sorters, then you can then actually see it operating, and you can see the grain going through the colour sorters. So.
And do you end up 100% sure that everything's clean when it comes out?
Yeah, to a point. Yeah, I'd say it's very efficient. So no, it's good investment, I'd say.
Then it was back outside with Dan Parrott to look at the storage silos, where the grain has to be kept dry and ready to transport to the millers.
There are 4 columns here. It's a continuous flow dryer, so it continuously goes in the top and comes out the bottom at the same time. The grain's in the centre part of the column that you're looking at, so that holds 70 tonnes per column. And then you can see these huge square silencers this side. Attached to that are the big fans.
If we're following our loaf of bread, where do the lorries come to get loaded up?
The 2 large overhead bulk tanks on that side are where the majority of the outloading happens, comes in at harvest. We tip like with like in harvest. We then look at the market. We'll then blend Farmer A's product with Farmer B's product to make a consistent bulk.
When you're buying a loaf of bread on the supermarket shelf, you know what it's going to taste like.
People want the same product day in, day out, month in, month out. And we're delivering wheat to exactly the same spec today as we were delivering in the first week of September.
Dan Parrott, Operations Manager at Camgrain, and on Friday's programme we'll be joining the millers to see the final stage of the British loaf. There are calls for Wales and Scotland to join England in imposing a countrywide blue tongue restriction zone to try to contain the virus. Neither Wales nor Scotland currently have cases of the disease, which affects sheep, cattle and goats. If they don't join the restriction zone, livestock will, in effect, be banned from crossing the borders. Decisions on this are due to be made this week. Chris Dodds from the Livestock Auctioneers Association told me it's vital that livestock can be moved freely.
We're not very far away from the main store and breeding sales, especially of sheep, when tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of animals move from their upland farms to the lowland farms, both for feeding and for breeding purposes. So a lot of the future breeding flock and herd are bred in the more upland farms, and they move down into the lowland ones where they spend the rest of their life. And it would be the inability to move these animals in a normal way, in fact move them at all really, if restricted zones are put in place, that would stop that.
But if there's a restricted zone for the whole of England, which is coming in on the 1st of July, that means there would be freedom of movement for animals within England, doesn't it?
Within England, exactly. But, you know, if you take one of our markets that is in England but borders the Welsh border, sits right near the Welsh border, last year there was 100,000 animals moved from that market into Wales. And there's suggestions of everything having to be pre-movement tested if it wants to move into Wales, at great cost to the farmer. You know, you're looking at tens of millions of pounds just within one market to facilitate that trade. And those animals need to go to the farmers as their future breeding stock.
So is the answer then for England, Wales and Scotland to declare their own blue tongue restriction zone so that animals can move freely between all three? Would that work?
Well, we believe that there should be one restricted zone. The whole of GB should go into it, and that would allow free movement, and that we as an industry and governments should be pushing our farmers to protecting their herds and flocks with the vaccine that's available.
What proportion of flocks and herds do you think are vaccinated at the moment? And how difficult would it be to get everyone to vaccinate?
We haven't had a vaccine for Blue Tongue 3 for particularly long. So the manufacturers developed a vaccine last year, and our governments at different stages permitted the use of the vaccine. So we have had the vaccine for several months now, but not years.
And how likely is it, do you think, that the government might be listening and say, yes, OK, let's all operate together and have one restriction zone, and then the freedom of movement is easy?
I don't know, but I ideally hope that they are, because it would be catastrophic for the industry if they can't move their animals. And, you know, we'd very quickly get into an animal welfare worry with upland farms not being able to move their sheep in the direction that they should go. And undoubtedly we would see a 2 or 3 tier market developed for stock going to slaughter in value money-wise.
If the disease can't be passed from one animal to another, what is the point of restriction zones?
That's a very good question. I mean, restricted zones to a point are there to try and slow the virus down. I don't think anyone thinks that it will stop the virus. It's simply a matter of slowing it down. And our thoughts are, if you're slowing it down for the inevitable, why do we want to cripple the industry for something that people are thinking it won't stop it anyway?
Chris Dodds from the Livestock Auctioneers Association. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Sally Challoner. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.